I always believed a wedding unites families. But that night, I learned it can shatter them instead. My name is Fred Jackson. I'm 55 years old, a mother of 3, and a woman who never imagined she would stand in the middle of a wedding hall watching 2 families collapse at the same time. But that night, the night my oldest son got married, I realized that a single speech, a single sentence, can destroy more than a lifetime of love ever built. My son's name is Toad, my firstborn, my quiet one, my steady one. He had always been the most responsible of my children. He never rushed into anything. He thought things through, he planned, he worked hard, and when he finally found love, I believed the universe had finally given him what he deserved. The church was glowing that day. I still remember the floral scent of lilies drifting through the air, the soft golden light strung along the walls, the gentle chatter of guests settling into the pews. Everything looked perfect. Perfect in the way weddings look in movies. And there he was, my son, standing at the altar in his navy blue suit, the one he'd saved months to buy. His hands were slightly trembling, but his smile was peaceful. He was nervous, yes, but he was also the happiest I had ever seen him. I thought nothing could ruin that moment. I was wrong. When the time came for the speeches at the reception, I already felt a knot inside my stomach, though I didn't know why. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was something darker. But when the bride's father, Humphrey Sterling, stood up and lifted his champagne glass, something inside me tightened. Humphrey Sterling. A name everyone in our city knew. A man with influence, connections, money, and a reputation shaped by fear and admiration. He owned a massive construction firm, Sterling and Associates, and people always spoke about him with that strange mix of respect and caution. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a deep voice that filled any room he entered. He looked like someone used to commanding silence, used to being listened to, used to winning. He raised his glass and cleared his throat. "I want to make a toast," he began, his voice echoing through the hall. "To my daughter, Sophia. Since she was little, she's been stubborn. God knows how stubborn she can be." People laughed politely, and today, he continued, she made one of the most stubborn decisions of her life. Another round of light laughter, but then his smile shifted. It became sharper, crueler. He looked straight at my son, straight at the young man who had just promised to love his daughter for the rest of his life. She insisted on marrying this young man. He said, "And well, this boy," he paused for effect, "is an idiot." Laughter burst through the room like fireworks. People clapped. Some chuckled with discomfort, others with amusement, but they all laughed, except me. Except my son. I watched the color drain from his face as if someone had pulled the life out of him. His shoulders slumped. His eyes fell to the floor. He tried to smile, to hide the pain, but I saw it. A mother always sees it. My fingers shook. My throat tightened. I gripped my napkin so hard I nearly tore it in half. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to pull that microphone from his hand, but I didn't, not yet, because while everyone else laughed, I remembered something Humphrey didn't know. I knew his secret. I knew what he hid behind that expensive suit and polished smile. I knew the truth he thought no one would ever uncover, and that night, as laughter filled the hall, I made a decision. This man would not walk away unscathed. He would not spit on my son's dignity and expect silence. Not when I had enough information to burn his entire world to the ground. But before I tell you what I exposed at that wedding, before I tell you how his lies unraveled, I need to explain how this all began, because this story didn't start at the wedding. It started months earlier. It started on a quiet winter afternoon in my kitchen. I remember that day vividly. January, cold. The kind of cold that makes your bones ache. My son walked in with a smile so wide I knew something was different. He poured us both spiced coffee, our afternoon ritual, and sat across from me. "Mom," he said softly, "I met someone." I raised my eyebrows. My son had never brought a girl home before. Not seriously. Not with that tone. What's her name? I asked. Sophia, he replied, and his whole face brightened. She's amazing, Mom, smart, driven, funny. She makes me laugh. And then, unlike every other time he talked about someone, he blushed. I hadn't seen him blush since he was a teenager. He told me she was studying architecture, that she was finishing her degree, that she came from a wealthy family, a very wealthy family. And then he mentioned her last name, Sterling. My spoon froze halfway in my cup. Something about that name tugged at my memory, but I couldn't place it at the time. My son kept talking, telling me how in love he was, how happy he felt, and I was happy for him. I truly was, but that strange instinct, the one only mothers have, whispered in my ear, Fred, be careful. Look deeper. At the time, I didn't know why. But soon, very soon, I would. When Sophia came over for dinner that weekend, she won me over immediately. She was warm, humble, respectful. She helped set the table. She thanked me repeatedly for dinner. She spoke about her dreams with such sincerity it was hard not to admire her. But the moment she mentioned her father, her voice changed. Her shoulders tightened. Her eyes darted away. My dad is demanding, she confessed. He expects a lot, sometimes too much. The more she spoke about him, the more uneasy I became. And when she admitted she hadn't told her father she was dating my son, I understood something important. Her father was a man who judged people by the size of their bank account. And my son, my honest, hard-working son, did not fit into the world he wanted for his daughter. That was the first warning. But it wouldn't be the last. As the months went by, as the engagement happened, as wedding plans moved forward, I noticed the pattern clear as daylight. Mr. Sterling looked down on my son. He thought my son wasn't good enough. He thought my family wasn't worthy. But what he didn't know was that I had already started digging into his life. And what I found changed everything. Before I expose everything I discovered about Mr. Sterling, the lies, the affairs, the stolen money, let me take you to the moment where it all started unraveling. Sometimes your gut warns you long before your eyes see the truth. And when my instinct whispered about Humphrey Sterling, I should have known it wasn't a coincidence. The months leading up to the wedding were supposed to be joyful dress fittings, venue tours, late-night planning calls. But for me, they were overshadowed by something I couldn't quite name at the time. A heaviness. A sense that something dark was hiding beneath the shiny surface of the Sterling family. And every time Mr. Sterling appeared, that feeling grew stronger. Todo was glowing during that period. He'd never been the type to show excitement easily, but with Sophia, he was different. He walked lighter, smiled more, talked more freely. I saw parts of him awaken, parts I had prayed for years would find love. But love wasn't the problem. Her father was. It started the day my son walked into my living room with rain dripping down his hair, his clothes damp from the storm outside. He looked nervous. Mom, he said quietly, I need to talk to you. We sat down. The sound of rain tapping softly against the window. I'm going to propose to Sophia. My heart jumped with happiness, but a sting of fear followed. Have you met her family properly? I asked. Yes, he replied. I went to their house 2 weeks ago, and I leaned forward, bracing myself. That man, he whispered, rubbing his hands together. Her father is strange, Mom. He asked me everything about my life, my job, my salary, how much I've saved, whether the first own property. He even asked how much I had in my bank account. It felt like someone had dropped a stone into my stomach. And what did you say? The truth, he sighed. That I earn well. That I'm saving. That I'm not rich but I'm stable. And his response? My son's jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. He said his daughter is used to a certain standard of living, and that not just anyone could meet it. I felt anger burn through me, but I swallowed it. And Sophia, She defended me, he said with a sad smile. She told him love mattered more than money. That should have comforted me. But it didn't, because I knew men like Humphrey Sterling. I'd seen them in my life, in my community, at my workplace, men who judged goodness by wealth, men who disrespected quietly, subtly, in ways that left invisible scars. And the worst part, they always believe their image is untouchable. But the universe has a strange way of exposing the truth, and fate gave me my first glimpse on a random afternoon. I remember it vividly. I was sitting in a cafe downtown Southern Star enjoying a cup of coffee while watching people pass by. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar figure walk in. Humphrey Sterling. But he wasn't alone. A younger woman walked in with him, long dark hair, soft eyes, simple clothes. She wasn't his wife. I had seen Mrs. Sterling twice already. This woman kissed him on the lips. Not a friendly peck. A lover's kiss. And two little children, maybe 5 and 7, ran up to him shouting, "Daddy." I froze. The room seemed to blur. My breath caught in my throat. I sat there, unable to move, staring at the scene unfolding like a nightmare I didn't know I had. Humphrey laughed with them. He lifted the little girl into his arms. He kissed the woman again. He looked happy. Happy in a family that wasn't supposed to exist. I felt sick. My vision swam. I paid my bill, walked out quickly, got into my car, and sat there gripping the steering wheel. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. This wasn't just a man with a temper or a superiority complex. This wasn't just a father who didn't approve of my son. This was a man living a double life. A man lying to everyone, including his own daughter. That day changed everything. From that moment on, I couldn't sit still. I needed answers. I needed to protect my son. I never wanted to interfere in his relationship, but how could I let him walk into a family built on secrets this big? So I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Roy Mendes. He worked in a tiny, outdated office above a dry cleaner, one of those hidden corners of the city people only go to when they're desperate. I knocked. He called me in. And as soon as I saw his calm, analytical eyes, I knew I had come to the right place. I told him everything. The cafe, the woman, the children, the wedding. The way Mr. Sterling had belittled my son. He didn't judge me. He didn't interrupt. "Do you have a photo of him?" he asked. I did. From some corporate event online. He studied it carefully. "I'll need a week. A week." "Yes," he nodded. "If he has another family, I'll find it. And if he has other secrets." He paused, tapping his pen. "Men like that usually have plenty." It cost $5,000, money I didn't really have. But my son's future was worth more than any number on a bill. And that week, those 7 days felt like 7 years. I pretended everything was normal. I cooked breakfast. I helped with wedding details. I laughed when they showed me photos of venues. I hugged Sophia when she came over, feeling her innocence in my arms. But inside I was drowning in anxiety. Every night, I sat alone in my room replaying what I saw at the cafe, the kiss, the children, the laughter, the lies, and I wondered, what else was he hiding? On Friday, the call finally came. "Mrs. Jackson," Roy said calmly. "I need you to come in." My legs nearly gave out. I rushed to his office, climbed the stairs 2 at a time, pushed open the door, and there he was, sitting behind his desk. A folder in front of him. He didn't smile. "Sit down," he said gently. I sat, gripping my purse so tightly my hands hurt. "What did you find?" He turned the folder toward me. Double quotes, "Mrs. Jackson," he said quietly, "your future-in-law has 2 families." My breath left my body. On the desk were photographs, dozens of them. Mr. Sterling leaving the apartment with the woman, walking the kids to school, holding hands with her in a supermarket, entering hotels, paying bills. Every picture felt like a knife. "And that's not all," Roy said. My head snapped up. "What else?" He opened another set of documents: bank transfers, company statements, expense reports. He's been using company funds to support the second family, Roy explained. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. I stared at the evidence. My hands shook, but he wasn't done. The company, he continued, is in serious financial condition. Debts, lawsuits, unfinished projects. He has been siphoning money for so long the damages are almost irreversible. Everything inside me went silent, and his personal finances. I asked, barely breathing. Roy sighed. Millions in loans. Unpaid taxes. Maxed out credit cards. And from what I can tell, the company is 6 months away from complete collapse. I closed my eyes. Mayor Sterling, a man who called my son an idiot, was drowning in lies, infidelity, and fraud, and he didn't even know the truth was sitting in a folder on my lap. That evening, as I drove home with the documents hidden under my seat, I realized something. This wasn't just about protecting my son anymore. It was about protecting Sophia. It was about justice for all the people he had cheated. It was about stopping a man who believed he was untouchable. But I also knew something else. This truth would destroy everything. What Roy uncovered was only the beginning. The closer the wedding got, the darker the secrets became, and soon, even the rehearsal dinner turned into a battlefield I never expected. When a family lives on lies, the truth doesn't knock, it kicks the door down. And I could already hear the hinges breaking long before anyone else noticed. The weeks before the wedding were pure torment for me. Every smile I gave was an act. Every nod, every encouraging word, every moment I pretended to be excited. It was all a mask I wore so my son wouldn't see that I was drowning in secrets. The folder from Roy stayed hidden under a pile of blankets in my closet. Every night, after everyone else was asleep, I quietly took it out and went through each page again and again until the words blurred. The affair, the deception, the stolen money, the collapsing company, the second family. And the worst part, my son had no idea he was about to marry into a disaster. I couldn't tell him. Not yet, not without ruining his trust in me. Not without hurting Sophia. Not without destroying everything right before his biggest day. So I waited. And I watched, waiting for the moment when Humphrey Sterling would slip, because I knew he would. Men like him always do. One Saturday morning, Sophia called me, her voice trembling. Mrs. Jackson, can we meet? Please. Her tone alone told me something was wrong. We met at a small cafe near my house. When she walked in, her eyes were red and puffy, like she had cried for hours. She sat across from me, twisting a napkin in her hands. It's my dad, she whispered. My stomach tightened. What happened? She exhaled shakily. He wants to control everything about the wedding. Everything. Every guest, every decoration, every detail. I tried to stay calm. What exactly is he trying to do? She lifted her eyes, and the pain in them made my heart ache. He said he doesn't want ordinary people at the wedding. My hands curled into fists under the table. Ordinary people. I repeated forcibly. She nodded. He said the guest list needs to be high profile. That he doesn't want our wedding to look like a neighborhood party. I felt heat rush up my neck. How can he say that? I demanded. Your fiancé's family is not ordinary, Sophia. We are honest, hard-working people. I know, she whispered, tears forming again. I told him that. But he won't listen. My mom won't speak up either. She just sits there quietly, like she always does. Her voice cracked. I'm so tired. Mrs. Jackson, I'm tired of trying to please a man who never thinks anything is good enough. She broke down. And I reached across the table and took her hands. Sophia, I said gently, your father's opinion is his problem, not yours. If you love my son, then fight for your happiness. She nodded slowly but sadly. I'm trying. But he threatens to cancel everything if I don't do it his way. The venue, the food, the decorations, he insists on paying, and he says that gives him the right to decide everything. And he's angry that he doesn't have the money to contribute. My heart tightened. That man's ego was going to suffocate her. That wedding is not his, I said firmly. It belongs to you and too. If he's making everything miserable, then maybe the two of you should do things differently. She shook her head weakly. We can't. We don't have the money for a different wedding. And he doesn't want to disappoint me. It took everything inside me to remain calm, because all I could think of was this: if only she knew who her father really was. But it wasn't time yet. Instead, I hugged her and let her cry, and in that moment, I realized something painful and undeniable. Sophia was as trapped as I was. She wasn't spoiled. She wasn't entitled. She wasn't like her father. She was a victim of the man he truly was, and that made what I needed to do even harder. 2 weeks before the wedding, the Sterlings hosted a rehearsal dinner. My son begged me to come. Mom, please, he said gently. I want you to be part of this. I didn't want to go. Every part of me knew walking into that house meant stepping straight into the lion's den, but I couldn't let my son face that family alone. The house was enormous. 3 stories tall, glowing with luxury, decorated with expensive artwork, framed photos, and polished marble floors. Everything screamed money. But now that I knew the truth, all I could see was how much of it was paid for with lies. Mrs. Sterling greeted me politely. Her smile was gentle but empty, the smile of a woman who had spent years swallowing her pain. Then from across the room he appeared, Humphrey Sterling. He approached with a confident smile, extending his hand as though he hadn't humiliated my son days earlier. Mrs. Jackson, he said smoothly. What a pleasure to have you here tonight. The arrogance behind his politeness made my stomach turn. Thank you for inviting me, I replied, keeping my voice steady. We sat for dinner, imported cheeses, red wine, perfectly plated meals. The food tasted like dust in my mouth. During the meal, Mr. Sterling held court, bragging endlessly about his business, about the homes he built, about the projects he led, about the connections he had. If only the guests knew how hollow his words were, how close he was to losing everything. Watching him lie so effortlessly made my skin crawl. When the meal ended, he stood and raised his glass. I'd like to make a toast, he announced. My heart tightened. To my daughter, he said, looking at Sophia with pride. She's intelligent, beautiful, and has always made me proud. Then he turned to my son, and of course, Todo, a humble young man. The word humble dripped like poison. My son lowered his eyes. Sophia's jaw tightened, and I hope, Mr. Sterling continued, that this marriage brings ambition and growth. Because in our family, we value success. He looked directly at me. Don't you agree, Mrs. Jackson? I met his gaze without flinching. No, I said calmly. I believe honesty is more valuable than anything else. A cold silence fell across the table. Sterling's smile stiffened. His eyes darkened. He understood exactly what I meant, and he hated it. The room grew thick with tension. After dinner, Mr. Sterling approached me privately. Mrs. Jackson, he said sharply, follow me to my study. We need to talk. I followed him down a long hallway into a room lined with bookshelves and expensive furniture. He closed the door behind us. Let's speak plainly, he began, arms crossed. Your son is a good boy, but he lacks ambition. He earns too little. He doesn't own property. He has no financial stability. I clenched my jaw, and my daughter, he continued, deserves someone who can give her the life she's accustomed to. I stood up straight. My son has integrity, I said firmly. Something money can't buy. He laughed coldly. Integrity doesn't pay bills. No, I responded evenly. But lies eventually cost everything. His eyes narrowed. Listen carefully, he snapped. I paid for this wedding. I control how it happens. And when they get married, Sophia will continue to depend on me because your son can't support her. I didn't blink. I hear you, I said quietly. But I don't think you realize how close you are to losing everything you're pretending to control. He froze. He didn't understand what I meant. Not yet, but he would, Dotto. He would, because his downfall was already on its way, the closer we got to the wedding day. The more explosive the truth became, and soon. Not even Mr. Sterling's wealth could hide the storm that was coming. There are moments in life when silence becomes heavier than truth, and every day closer to the wedding. That silence felt like a stone on my chest. The days leading up to the wedding passed slower than any days I'd lived before. Every hour felt stretched, tense, as if the air around me knew a storm was brewing. I could barely sleep. I would wake up in the middle of the night and stare at my closet, at the folder hidden beneath old blankets, like it was a ticking bomb waiting for me to pull the pin. Every lie Mr. Sterling told lived inside that folder, and every truth he had lived inside me. I kept telling myself that the wedding day was not the right moment to expose him. But I also knew deep down, if he humiliated my son again, I would not stay seated. I would not stay silent. Not this time. One afternoon, a few days before the big day, Sophia called me again. Her voice shook over the phone. Mrs. Jackson, can I come over? I told her yes immediately. When she arrived, she looked fragile, drained. Her eyes were swollen, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. It's my dad, she whispered before she even sat down. What did he do now? I asked gently. She sighed, pressing her fingers to her temples. He keeps changing things. He won't let me invite those relatives. He says they don't fit the atmosphere he wants. He says the wedding is a reflection of our family's status. My jaw tightened. Status, that cursed word. And my mom just stands there. Sophia continued. She never says anything. She never supports me. She just agrees with whatever he wants. That detail didn't surprise me. Mrs. Sterling's eyes always held a quiet sadness, the kind of sadness that comes from years of swallowing emotions. I feel guilty, Sophia said, tears sliding down her cheeks. I feel like everything is falling apart, and I don't know what to do anymore. I put my hand over hers. Sweetheart, none of this is your fault. You're trying to make everyone happy, and that's impossible when someone else is trying to control everything. She nodded slowly. I just want my dad to be proud of me, she whispered. Just once, her words broke something inside me, because I knew, in ways she didn't, that her father would never give her that. Not because she wasn't worthy, but because men like Humphrey Sterling don't know how to love anyone but themselves. Later that night, after she left, I took the folder out again. I stared at the photos of him laughing with his second family. I stared at the documents, the stolen money, the fraud, the hidden accounts, and I told myself, not yet, not today. But soon, 2 days before the wedding, I got another call from Roy, the investigator. Mrs. Jackson, he said, I need to see you. I found something else. My heart dropped. Something else. What else could there be? I drove straight to his office. When I walked inside, I could tell immediately from his expression that whatever he found wasn't small. Please sit, he said seriously. I sat down slowly. What is it? I whispered. He opened another folder, thicker than the last. I did a deeper financial investigation, he explained. And what I found is bad. I braced myself. Your son's future father-in-law isn't just cheating, Roy said. He's involved in construction fraud. I felt the blood drain from my face. What kind of fraud? I forced out. Roy took a deep breath. 2 years ago, Sterling and Associates won a government contract. A massive project minus 120 affordable homes. He received $25 million upfront. My eyes widened. And he only built 40 of them, Roy said. Then he pocketed the rest. I felt sick. He blamed suppliers. He blamed delays. He blamed market costs. But the truth is, he simply stole the money and covered it with paperwork. Now the government is investigating him, along with the Anti-Corruption Bureau. I stared at the documents he placed in front of me, newspaper clippings, internal emails, legal summons, bank withdrawals, and they're preparing to act, Roy continued. Within the next 3 months, maybe even sooner, there will be an arrest warrant. The room felt like it tilted. He's going to prison? I whispered. Yes, Roy confirmed. It's unavoidable. He wasn't finished. The company is essentially collapsing, he added. Employees haven't received full salaries. Equipment has been repossessed. There are lawsuits piling up from every direction. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, and his personal finances. I forced out again. Roy looked at me sympathetically. He owes millions. Back taxes, loans, credit cards. He bought a BMW in cash last week, likely with stolen company funds. I felt my stomach twist. Everything this man bragged about, his wealth, his reputation, his success, was a crumbling lie. And Mrs. Sterling? I whispered. Does she know? I doubt it, he said. There's no sign she does. She lives in her own bubble, maybe out of fear, maybe denial. I swallowed hard, and Sophia. My heart broke at the thought of her discovering all of this. Roy placed a comforting hand on the desk. You hired me to find the truth, he said calmly. And now you have it. The question is, what are you going to do with it? I stared at the folder, at the lies, at the proof, at the lives this man had ruined. I don't know, I whispered. Roy nodded. Just remember, whatever you choose, do it with a clear conscience. But how could my conscience ever be clear? Either I protected the wedding and stayed silent, or I protected my son and told the truth and shattered everything. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something. This wasn't just a family problem anymore. It was a matter of justice. The people he cheated, the homes he never built, the employees he never paid, the woman he lied to, the children he hid. This truth had a weight larger than any wedding, and whether I liked it or not, I was responsible for carrying it. The next morning, one day before the rehearsal dinner, I visited my friend Teresa, a family lawyer. I brought both folders with me. She read through everything silently, her expression shifting from shock to disgust. Fred, she finally said, looking at me seriously, this is explosive. I know if you reveal this now, you're going to destroy that entire family. I know, I repeated quietly, and are you ready for that responsibility? I stared at my hands. I don't want to destroy anything, I whispered. I just want to protect my son from a man who believes he's superior to everyone else. A man who humiliates others as easily as breathing. Teresa leaned back in her chair, thinking deeply. If you expose him, she warned, he'll deny everything. He'll attack you. He'll call you a liar. I have proof, I said calmly. Proof helps, she replied. But it won't stop him from trying to tear you apart. Silence filled the room. Then I said the words that sealed my decision. I'm going to wait until the wedding. And if he humiliates my son again, I inhaled deeply. I'll end it all right there. Teresa stared at me, stunned. That will be brutal, she whispered. Yes, I said. But necessary, because this wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't about pride. It was about justice. It was about dignity. It was about finally bringing truth into a room full of lies. Before I left her office, Teresa gave me one last warning. When you expose him, you won't just destroy Humphrey. You will break Sophia, too. The thought made my heart ache. But I already knew the truth. Sophia's world wasn't whole to begin with. I was just the one holding up the mirror, the night before the wedding. The final pieces fell into place, and Mr. Sterling had no idea his empire was seconds away from collapsing in front of everyone. He knew. The night before a wedding should feel magical. But when lies are sitting at your table, even the candles seem afraid to glow. The day before the wedding felt strange from the moment I woke up. The air seemed heavier, as if something in the atmosphere knew what was coming. My hands kept shaking, and no matter how many times I tried to steady myself, I couldn't quiet the echo inside my mind. Tomorrow, everything might fall apart. That afternoon, Todo came over for dinner. He was nervous, excited, exhausted, all at once. His eyes were bright but restless, like he was carrying too much weight on his shoulders. "Mom," he said as he walked into the kitchen. Tomorrow's the big day. I had cooked his favorite meal, chicken. The same recipe I'd been making for him since he was a child. He sat down at the table, rubbing his hands together anxiously. "You look tired," I said gently. He laughed softly. "The wedding, work, last-minute stuff. It's all hitting me at once." He shook his head with a small smile. "But I'm happy. Really happy." That should have warmed my heart. Instead, it made the truth feel even heavier, because I knew what he didn't know. What Sophia didn't know. What none of them knew. I watched him take his first bite of dinner. My son, my baby. The boy I raised alone. The man who worked hard for everything he had. The man who was about to walk into a family built on deceit. He didn't deserve this storm. Not any of it. "How's Sophia?" I asked carefully. "She's stressed," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Dad keeps trying to change things. He wants to make a long speech tomorrow. He says it's important." My stomach dropped. A speech. Of course, that man. He wouldn't miss a chance to show dominance, to belittle, to shine in front of his wealthy friends while dimming my son's light. I had seen the warning signs from miles away, but hearing it confirmed. It was the final trigger. When Todo finished his meal and left for the night, I sat at the kitchen table long after he walked out the door. The house was quiet. Too quiet. On the table in front of me were 3 envelopes, thick, heavy, filled with the truth. One for Todo, one for Sophia, one for Mrs. Sterling. Each one held copies of the documents, photos, bank transfers, fraud evidence, proof of the second family, evidence of every lie Humphrey Sterling had built his empire on. I stared at the envelopes until the candle beside me melted down to a stub. Am I doing the right thing? I whispered the question into the empty kitchen, but then I remembered everything. The stolen money, the destroyed families, the second children hidden away, the humiliation, the arrogance. The way he looked at my son like he wasn't worth the dirt on his shoes, and suddenly the doubt vanished. I wasn't doing this out of anger. I wasn't doing this out of hatred. I was doing it because truth has a place in this world, and sometimes that place is exactly where it hurts the most. I placed the envelopes in my purse and prepared myself for what tomorrow would bring. Tomorrow wasn't just a wedding day. It was Judgment Day. The morning of the wedding arrived with a bright sky and a soft breeze, as if the world outside had no idea what was about to unfold. I got up early and brewed coffee, but my hands trembled as I poured it into the cup. I checked my purse twice. The envelopes were still there. Every step I took felt heavy, like I was walking toward the edge of a cliff. At 4 p.m., I arrived at St. Augustine's Parish. The church was breathtaking, white roses everywhere, ivory ribbons along the pews, soft candles burning on the altar. It looked like a dream, but even the beauty felt fragile. Behind the gorgeous decorations was a truth so sharp it could cut the entire room in half. I found my son in a small side room. He was adjusting his tie, breathing deeply, staring at himself in the mirror. When he saw me, he smiled and walked toward me. "Mom," he whispered, hugging me tightly. "You look handsome," I said, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. He gave a nervous laugh. "How do I look?" "Like someone ready to start a new life," I answered softly. He studied me for a moment. "You okay?" "Yes," I lied. He hugged me again, and my throat tightened. Because deep inside, I knew today would change him forever, and I didn't know if he would ever forgive me. The ceremony was beautiful. Painfully beautiful, Sophia walked down the aisle on her father's arm, glowing in a simple, elegant dress. The veil cascaded down her back like soft water. Her smile was genuine, full of love, and completely unaware of the truth her father carried like poison in his pocket. Sterling walked beside her proudly, chest puffed up like he owned the air in the room. The lies wrapped around him like an expensive suit. Every step he took made my pulse throb. As they reached the altar, Sophia looked at my son with pure love. Tears filled my eyes because I knew what was coming, and they didn't. The vows were exchanged. Rings placed. Hands trembling. Voices cracking with emotion. And then the words, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Applause filled the church. It should have been the happiest moment of our lives, but for me, it was the calm before the storm. The reception hall at the country club was massive, chandeliers sparkling overhead. White tablecloths, roses in tall vases, candles flickering. It was breathtaking, but even beneath the shimmer, there were cracks waiting to split open. More than 200 guests attended, politicians, business owners, wealthy families, all dressed in designer suits and gowns. You could feel the divide between their side and ours, but no one said it out loud. Food was served. Music played. Guests danced. Everything looked perfect, until the moment I had been waiting for. The toasts. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the bride's father, Mr. Humphrey Sterling, will now say a few words." My heart slammed against my ribs. He rose slowly, smoothed his suit, and walked toward the stage with that same smug confidence he always carried. The room grew quiet. He lifted his champagne glass, and then, "Good evening, everyone," he began. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate my daughter, my pride, my joy, my greatest blessing." People smiled politely. He continued with praises for Sophia, talking about her intelligence, her achievements, her beauty. Then his tone changed, and of course, he said, glancing at my son, "There's Todo." A familiar tightening pulled at my chest. Todo is a hard-working young man, humble. He said the word again with that same venomous touch. I gripped my napkin until my fingers hurt, and I must admit, he added, pausing dramatically, "My daughter could have chosen anyone, but she insisted on him." The room tnsed. Then, with a mocking smile, he delivered the sentence I knew was coming, and as I've told my family before, "That boy is an idiot." Laughter erupted, clapping, snickers, murmurs. And in that moment, every ounce of restraint inside me snapped. I stood up. My legs shook with adrenaline. My hands trembled. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I walked toward the stage without hesitation. This was the moment, the line he crossed, the final insult, and if he thought I would sit quietly in the shadows while he humiliated my son again, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The moment I pulled the microphone from his hand, the entire hall went silent, and what I said next tore his world apart. Every lie has an expiration date, and the moment I reached for that microphone, his time ran out. The instant my hand closed around the microphone, the entire hall froze. You could hear nothing, not the music, not the laughter that had filled the room seconds earlier, not even the clinking of glasses. Just silence. Thick, heavy, suffocating silence. Sterling's face went pale in an instant. Shock flickered in his eyes, the kind of shock men like him rarely experience, because they live their lives believing no one would ever dare challenge them. But I dared, because this wasn't about pride anymore. This wasn't about anger. This was about defending my son's dignity, something that man had stepped on twice now. I lifted the microphone slowly, and my voice shook when I began, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what I was about to unleash. "Good evening," I said, my voice echoing through the hall. "My name is Fred Jackson. I'm Todo's mother." A murmur moved through the crowd like a wave. "A few minutes ago," I continued, "Mr. Sterling decided to humiliate my son on his wedding day. In front of his family. In front of his friends. In front of all of you. Eyes widened. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Sophia's face drained of colour. My son, my sweet son, stared at me like he didn't know whether to stand beside me or fall apart. But before I say anything else, I said, my voice steadying, I want everyone here to know one thing. I looked straight at Mr. Sterling. My son is not an idiot. The room held its breath. My son is an honest, hard-working man. A man who earns every dollar he makes. A man who treats people with respect. A man who doesn't need to lie, cheat, or manipulate to feel powerful. Humphrey stepped forward, his jaw clenched. Mrs. Jackson, I raised a hand, silencing him. No, I said sharply. You've spoken enough. Now you'll listen. A ripple of approval swept through some of the guests. Others stiffened, sensing disaster, because while you've spent this evening pretending to be a respectable man, I said. Turning toward the crowd, I've been holding the truth. I opened my purse, pulled out the folder, and the gasp that moved through the room was almost deafening. For weeks, I continued. I've been investigating this man, and what I found is far worse than calling someone an idiot. Mr. Sterling's face turned red, then white, then back to red again. Don't you dare, he hissed. I dare, I said, my voice sharp as glass. Because you dared to disrespect my son. You dared to stand here and pretend you're better than everyone. You dared to use this room, this night, to feed your ego. I held up the first sheet of paper. Let's start with this. I said, Humphrey Sterling has two families. A collective gasp exploded through the hall. Chairs scraped. Hands flew to mouths. Voices whispered in shock. Mrs. Sterling stood from her chair, trembling. Sophia grabbed the edge of the table, her knuckles white. It's a lie. Humphrey shouted, trying to grab the microphone. She's insane. I stepped back, dodging him easily. A lie. I repeated calmly. Then perhaps we should all look at these photos. I held up picture after picture. Him with Veronica, him with the children. Him kissing the woman outside her apartment. People crowded closer, eyes widening, lips curling in disgust. Those children, I continued, are his. He pays for their school, their home, their clothes. I lifted another page. And he pays for all of it with money stolen from his own company. A roar of murmurs filled the room. This man, I said, my voice rising, is not the successful businessman he pretends to be. He's a fraud, a thief, a liar. Humphrey lunged again, but several guests stepped between us, not to protect me, but to keep him from making an even bigger fool of himself. There's more, I said. Flipping through the pages, construction fraud, missing funds, down payments stolen from families waiting for homes, government money taken and never used for the projects they assigned him. A woman in the back gasped, oh my God, he built 40 houses, I continued, out of 120, and pocketed the money for the rest. People turned to stare at him, disgusted, horrified, angry. And if that isn't enough, I said, his company is falling apart. Debts, lawsuits, unpaid employees, repossessed equipment, all hidden under this facade of wealth. I held up the final set of documents, and soon, I said clearly, the Anti-Corruption Bureau will arrest him. Because his crimes have caught up to him. Humphrey's wife collapsed into her chair, covering her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Sophia's knees buckled, and her maid of honor held her upright. My son stared at me in shock, his face pale and broken. Humphrey pointed at me, trembling with rage. You're lying. She's lying. She forged everything. I shook my head slowly. If I had forged it, I said, you wouldn't look so terrified. The room split open with whispers. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, maybe in his entire life, he had nothing to say. Guests began grabbing the documents I passed forward, reading them in disbelief, some shouting, some cursing. Others turning away in shame. Mrs. Sterling suddenly stood. "Humphrey," she said hoarsely, "is it true?" He stared at her, his mouth opening and closing, but no explanation came. No excuse, no apology, no words, and in that moment, she understood everything. I placed the microphone on the stage, turned toward my son, and walked down from the platform. My legs shook, but I kept moving. When I reached him, I took his hands. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "But I couldn't let him humiliate you again." Tears filled his eyes. "Mom, is all of that true?" "Yes," I whispered. All of it around us. The hall dissolved into chaos, shouting, crying, accusations, people rushing out the doors. Others confronting Mr. Sterling, security stepping in. Guests pulling out their phones to verify what they saw. In the middle of it all, Humphrey Sterling stood alone, stripped of his reputation. His lies bleeding into the open, but the cost of truth had only just begun. The truth didn't end in that hall. The aftermath was even more devastating. My son's pain, Sophia's tears, and the destruction that followed would test every bond we thought we had. Truth doesn't end when it's spoken. It echoes afterward, shaking every life it touches. And after that night, none of us were ever the same. The hall emptied slowly, like a great beast dying. No music, no laughter, no clinking glasses. Just voices, sharp, broken, confused, bouncing off the walls. The roses that once brightened the room now looked wilted under the harsh lights. Tables sat half-eaten, champagne flutes untouched. Like the wedding froze at the exact second everything shattered. My son sat alone at a table, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Sophia stood a few feet away, crying quietly, unsure where to go. Mrs. Sterling leaned against a corner wall, her sisters holding her up. And Humphrey was gone, vanished like a coward the second he realized the truth had claws. I walked toward my son slowly. Every step felt heavy. "Son," I said softly. He didn't look up. "Two," I whispered again, kneeling beside him. "Look at me." He finally lifted his face. His eyes were red, a mix of shock, anger, heartbreak. "Why, Mom?" he whispered. "Why did you do that? Tonight?" His voice cracked in a way I had never heard before. It felt like someone stabbed me through the chest. "Because I couldn't let that man destroy your dignity again," I said quietly. "Not in front of everyone. Not on your wedding day, but you destroyed the wedding," he said, his voice trembling. "You ruined everything." I swallowed hard. "No, son. The wedding was ruined the moment he picked up the microphone. I just exposed the truth he deserved to face." He shook his head slowly, grief clouding his expression. "You could have told me earlier. In private. You could have warned me." I tried. I whispered. "But you were so happy. I couldn't take that from you." He stood abruptly and walked toward the window. The night outside was still and dark. "Mom, Sophia's family hates me now. Her life is destroyed because of this." "No," I said firmly. "Her father destroyed her life." I just revealed what was already broken. He didn't answer. He just kept staring out the window, shoulders tense, breathing unsteady. Then he said the words I feared most, "I need to be alone," and he walked away, past me, out the door, into the night, leaving me standing there with tears burning in my eyes. Sophia approached next. Her mascara was smudged, her dress wrinkled from hours of crying. She looked like a child who had just lost her entire world. "Mrs. Jackson," she whispered. I braced myself. "Is it all true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Everything you said." I nodded. Double quotes, "Yes." "Sophia," she pressed her hands to her face and sobbed. Her entire body shook. "My dad. He has another family. Children." She choked out. I gently touched her shoulder. "I'm so sorry." Her words came out broken. "I didn't know anything. I didn't see anything." "Of course you didn't," I said softly. "Because you trusted him. And trust isn't a crime." She cried harder. "My mom is destroyed. My sisters. They don't know what to think, and two, he won't even look at me, he's hurting, I said. He doesn't blame you, she shook her head. It feels like everything is my fault. It's not, I said firmly. Your father built that house of lies. Not you. She sat down heavily, tears falling uncontrollably. What do I do now? She whispered. How do I fix any of this? I sat beside her. You don't, I said gently. Not now. Right now, you just breathe. You grieve. You let the truth settle. Sophia looked at me through blurred eyes, and too. Will he ever forgive me, or you? I don't know, I said honestly. But I believe he will. In time, she nodded weakly. Later, Mrs. Sterling approached. She looked older, as if the truth had aged her years in a single night. She carried the envelope I had given her. Her hands trembled. Mrs. Jackson, she said quietly, yes. She stared at me with a mix of pain and anger. Is it true? Everything in here? Yes, I said gently. She closed her eyes tightly as tears escaped. I suspected things, she whispered. But I never wanted to know. My heart softened. You didn't want the truth because truth is terrifying, I said softly. Especially when you've built your life trying to believe the best. She shook her head bitterly. You came here tonight and ripped my family apart. No, I replied steadily. Your husband did that years ago. I just stopped pretending. She looked away. He's not my husband anymore, she said after a long silence. Not after this. What are you going to do? She looked at the envelope. I'll file for divorce. I'll protect my daughters. And I'll never let that man hurt us again. She walked away, head held higher than before, carrying truth like a heavy bag that finally had handles. I left the hall around midnight. The sky was cold, the streets silent. When I got in my car, the tears finally came. I cried for my son for losing his trust, for Sophia, whose world had cracked open, for Mrs. Sterling, who had lived in silence far too long. And for myself, because telling the truth had cost me something I wasn't sure I'd get back. My son didn't call the next day, or the day after, or the week after. He didn't open the door when I visited. He didn't respond to my messages, and I understood he needed time. He needed space to process everything. He needed to heal. I just didn't know how long it would take. 2 months later, the scandal broke publicly. Newspapers, online articles, news channels, everyone was talking about Humphrey Sterling, about the unfinished homes, the stolen down payments, the fraudulent accounting, the hidden family no one knew existed. The Anti-Corruption Bureau moved faster than expected. And one afternoon, as I sat drinking tea, the news flashed on my TV. Businessman Humphrey Sterling arrested on fraud charges. I watched him being escorted out of his office in handcuffs. No suit, no polished smile. Just a broken, defeated man whose lies had finally drowned him. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel victory. I felt sad. Because truth never wins without leaving casualties behind. One day, weeks later, I met Sophia again. We sat in the same cafe where she had cried before. She looked thinner, but stronger. Her eyes were sad, but steady. Mom filed for divorce, she said quietly. We're rebuilding everything. I nodded. And you? I'm learning, she said. I met the other children. They're sweet. Veronica didn't know he was married. She thought he was divorced. I sighed. He deceived everyone, I said softly. She nodded. But in a strange way. I'm glad I know the truth now. After a long pause, she finally asked, How is Tu? I exhaled slowly. He hasn't spoken to me yet. She nodded sadly. He hasn't spoken to me either. We sat in silence. 2 women connected by pain neither asked for. Then she touched my hand. Mrs. Jackson, thank you for protecting your son and for protecting me too. Those words, simple, sincere, were the first comfort I'd felt in months. And then, almost 3 months after the wedding disaster, my phone rang. It was him. Mom. My breath caught. Yes, son. Can we meet? He asked softly. Tears filled my eyes instantly. Yes, I whispered. Whenever you want. And in that moment, I knew truth hurts. Truth destroys. Truth scars. But truth also heals, slowly, painfully, but surely and eventually. We all return to the people who told us the truth, even if it broke us first. Looking back, I still wonder, if you were in my place, holding those secrets in your hands, watching your child be humiliated, what would you have done?